Hey guys, Zip Tie here. Today I'm going to run you through a quick service and lubrication of a centrifugal clutch on the trike. Bed blade. Yeah, that one. Okay. It's Sam. Sam, we're over there. What are you doing, buddy? What are you doing? Is it a good boy? He set. Got set. Defiant motherfucker. What are you doing up there? What are you doing? Come on. Let's go. Come on. Come on. Go around. Hey, be nice to those chuck-ins. All right, guys, gals, Wasteland friends, east side and west side, thanks for stopping in. Again, I know this is very simple for the motorheads or the gurus out there, but hopefully this will help somebody who doesn't turn wrenches or isn't super familiar with these small motors and systems. Hopefully it'll help out a fellow Wastelander. If you want to subscribe, go ahead and do it. I don't like pressuring people to like, subscribe, comment. I just make these because I've got downtime and I like doing the video editing. I don't really like talking in front of the camera. I like talking in general, but not having a conversation with a camera that doesn't talk back to me. Is that better? All right. Zip Tie here. So, the last episode we did a quick oil change on the Predator 212. My trike and my go-kart, they run a centrifugal clutch for a, quote, transmission, end quote. So that's the drivetrain, the centrifugal clutch. It just has clutch pads and springs, so when the motor spins faster, the clutch pads expand out and they grip on the outer bell, causing it to move and drive ahead. So the faster the engine spins, the heavier those weights are, the more they compress outwards, out against the bell housing, and they grip, and that's what drives it. That's what drives the chain that drives the driven sprocket, that drives the axle and spins the wheels. So this is a very cheap, a very simple, but not a very reliable or maintenance-free drive system. You'll lose a lot of power, a lot of torque through these types of clutches, and they do require a little bit of maintenance. A lot of people skip over that and have these clutches fail, and it's not the clutch's fault that you didn't clean it or lubricate it. So when I say lubrication, you don't want to lubricate the clutch pads, and I'll show you that when we tear it apart. You need to lubricate the inner shaft of the clutch because there's no bearings in it. There is no way to grease it. There's no way to oil it as it sits right here. Yeah, you could try to spray some PB Blaster or WD-40 lubrication at it, but you're going to get lubrication on your clutch pads and in your bell housing, and then that's going to cause it to have to work harder to turn and drive your rig, be it a mini bike, a trike, a go-kart. That's why a lot of people like to run the clutches with the rubber belts, the variators they're called in scooters, driven clutch and drive clutch. We're going to run through a quick service on this. So what we need to do is we're going to find, oh no, right there, there's our master link right there. Before we pop the master link, because I'm not going to, you could always loosen the engine mount up, and that moves the engine back and forth. That's what tightens and loosens the chain. So you could loosen that up so you don't have to take the chain apart. But that chain's actually a pretty good tightness where it is right there. So I'm not gonna yank that apart. I'm just gonna leave that the way that's mounted. I'm gonna pull the master link, and that'll get the chain off, and then we can slide that clutch off the engine shaft. But before we pull that master link, I'm gonna leave it on there so it adds a bit of friction. Doesn't do much, but we'll take that off. So the tools we need, yeah, we need lots of tools. No, not really. Very simple. So I know it's a 1/2 inch bolt that holds the centrifugal clutch on the engine shaft. We're going to need just a regular screwdriver to get that master link off. I'll show you what this is going to be used for in a second. And some oil. This is just some leftover synthetic oil I had on a vehicle oil change. I saved it in this little bottle just for this purpose. The other thing you need is either some parts cleaner, some engine degreaser. I highly recommend you use brake cleaner. I don't have any brake cleaner right now, so this is the next best thing I have that's not greasy, oily. Our mallet, 1/2 inch wrench, screwdriver, flat screwdriver, a little pry bar would work too. to remove our master link. But first, we're just going to leave that on there, add a little bit of friction to this. So this is the bolt that holds the centrifugal clutch on the engine shaft. Now the engine spins, as you can see. So we've got righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. I'm going left, but that's not working very well because the engine is spinning. So that's not going to ever loosen out of there. You're just spinning the engine over. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the rubber mallet, 1/2-inch wrench, go like this, and don't hit yourself. I'm just going to, my cameras are making it funny here. I normally probably would go the other direction. So there we go. So that little tap loosened this bolt. This bolt is what holds the centrifugal clutch on the engine drive shaft. So that's off, that's good. Now we're going to remove the master link. Let's move a little forward here. So in order to remove the master link, I'm simply going to place the flat screwdriver on the little edge of the master link here. It's going to go that way. And then I'm not going to use the, now you know what, maybe I will. I'm just going to use the wood handle now. I got it off. Now I'm going to be careful not to lose it. There's our chain. Alright, our chain's off. I'm going to take this opportunity. Alright, real quick, we're back over here at the bench. So, here's the chain that we just took off. Remember that waste oil that we had from changing the engine oil last episode? Yeah, we're going to use that. We're going to go just like this. Let's submerge it. So there is our chain. I haven't touched this trike since last year. So we're just going to let that thing soak in there. Soak up oil. Lubricate it a little bit while we're working on the centrifugal clutch. So now we've got our chain off. We've got our bolt off that holds the clutch on. And we're simply going to pull it off. We got some grease on there. I always recommend just a touch of grease on there so it doesn't ever seize up. Okay, here's our centrifugal clutch. There's one tool I forgot to mention at the beginning. We will need a pair of snap ring pliers here. Now this is kind of one of those cheap universal type deals. A bit of grime and wear and tear on this one from, I believe it's from a setting. We're going to spray this down. We're going to clean this up. Add any oil, a little grease internally there. So when I spoke about the inner housing and the outer bell housing shaft, this is what I was speaking about. This is the surface that the clutch spins on when it's idling. So that's just always going to be spinning because your motor shaft's spinning, and your drive, your chain that leads to your axle is not going to be spinning. So if your engine sits there idle, that's going to be spinning on that. So this is the surface that needs to be oiled. Now you want to use oil on this because if you try to put grease in there, these things get really, really hot. These bells can get red hot if you really beat on them. It's so hot that it'll actually ruin these springs in here and your clutch will be no good. So they get so hot that's why you want to use oil, because it'll continue to lubricate, where even if you try to use some high temperature grease, it'll eventually gum up and burn up in there. So oil. I like to use a little bit of old synthetic oil, or not used oil, but leftover synthetic oil. I don't put synthetic in any of these motors. But if you have some synthetic for another reason, it doesn't take much. I mean, this has lasted many, many times. You'll see in a second here. But before we do that, we're going to take a little sandpaper or emery cloth. Sandpaper or emery cloth. And we're just going to gently rough up the inside of this bell housing, and I'm going to do these clutch. Mostly cleaned. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the oil and we're going to add some to this inner shaft here. Add it down there. Try to get it all like that. We want it all, plenty of it on the inner shaft here. So it's got plenty of oil underneath it. We're going to add some oil on top of it. And you don't want to soak this entire thing with oil. because you don't want it going everywhere. But you want to make sure you get a coating on this. We're going to now add this, our bell, and we're going to add a little bit more oil down in there. And you don't want to get so much oil on it that you fill your clutch plates or get it in the bell housing, because that's just going to cause your clutch to slip. So now we're going to need to put the snap ring back on. So I'm doing this one-handed while holding the camera. Okay. Alright. Our snap ring's actually separating them too quick. Before we go adding any grease to the shaft, we're going to hang our chain up so the excessive amount of oil that's on it can drip. So we've got some grease, like this jar of grease here. One thing we want to do, I wasn't going to bring this up, but it needs it because it hasn't been serviced in a bit, is I'm simply going to add grease to the inner shaft. It's not going to really lubricate it. That is simply going to keep the clutch from rusting or seizing, because we don't use these toys all that often. It's going to keep that clutch from rusting or seizing to the shaft. Grease, I'll stick it on the inside of this, that way I make sure there's a good coating on both. Now we're going to put the clutch back on. Now see, these have a keyway. You probably can't see the keyway right here. That's where it is. So remember, we got the whole, if we turn this, our engine turns. Well, if we turn this right, it's going to be turning our engine the wrong way, so we're not going to want to turn it right. Easy trick you can do for that. As you come around to where your pull start is, if you notice when you pull the start, it moves the shaft. We need righty-tighty. So this is going to tighten it. So I'm going to put a little resistance on this with my pull start. So now we have our oiled up chain. Go ahead and get that line back up on our sprocket. I'm going to put it on in such a way so that master link ends up in an easy spot to access. So our master link is going to go back together right there. They say it's going to go back together. Alright, so our oil. So we want our master link always facing, the opening facing away from the direction it spins, or the closed end facing the way it goes, because on a lot of these mini bikes, go-karts, and trikes and things, these have large rear sprockets because of gearing, so these large rear sprockets and the chains run fairly low to the ground. So by having it face this direction, having the closed end face the way it's driving, it's going to have less of a chance of catching something. So a stick or a rock or the ground or the dirt, it's going to be catching this way instead of the other way, holding or prying your master link keeper on instead of bumping it off. There we have it.